I'm not surprised. All right. Well, we're going to be shifting up into college because we know that these conferences have just been fantastic. And at the same time, we're already preparing for a new realignment of the Pac-12, but also, too, the NIL deal, the college football playoff restructure. It's going to be really interesting. So to discuss that and also focusing in on them Wisconsin Badgers, here's Matt Perkins with Bleav in Badgers. I tell you, Matt, I mean, I especially with what we saw last year with Ohio State and how the Big Ten, like I've watching college football for as long as I have. I've had such great respects for the Big Ten, knowing that they're physical, they love playing in the trenches. Defense has always been such a big thing. But we know that, like with this the conference realignment, the NIL transfer portal thing, and then not to mention the new way of the college football playoff now. Now, you're not dealing with a conference bid. You got the 4 best teams, and then it's all 5 through 12. It's winner take all at the end of the day when you get to the Natty. So watching Wisconsin and then watching the rest of the other programs up and into this conference, I mean, that's just kind of how it pans out. How do you think Wisconsin really is preparing for this up-and-coming season? Because it's winner take all at this point.
I don't know if you've seen the Badger schedule at all this year, but it is an absolute murderer's row. I mean, it is complete. I mean, you look at, they've got Alabama, they've got like Ohio State, they've got all like the traditional, Minnesota, Iowa, all those good ones. I think they've got, I think Oregon again or something like that. Like the schedule for this fall for this team is insane. So I think that there's a good chance that the team is actually a lot better than they were last year, but might end up 4-8. Because that schedule is just so brutally tough. But the expectation, at least, is that it starts to resemble Wisconsin football again. The big move in the offseason made by Coach Fickell was to fire Phil Longo, actually midway through the 2024 season, brings in Brent Grimes over from Kansas, previously at Baylor, who is going to bring back a ground-focused attack, something that was not there at all under Coach Longo. That trial of the air raid did not fit, did not work from day one. Obviously, a lot of injuries to quarterbacks did not help, but they are going back to what Wisconsin fans have become accustomed to for the last 35 years. And that is they're going to run to the left, they're going to run to the right, and they're going to run it up the middle. And then they'll maybe throw some play action pass in off of that. But it's going to be all about establishing a run game, especially a wide zone. So that's Grimes' bread and butter, is, really getting out there, letting, the holes develop for some of those backs to hopefully, find the mismatch in the open field and explode out and, see some things that Wisconsin fans were used to seeing with a guy like Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor was an absolute beast at outside zone because he was patient. He'd set it up and then he would get his lane and he would accelerate through that. And Wisconsin has a couple second-year tailbacks in Dylan Jones and Darian Dupree, who will be getting the lion's share of the carries. And both those guys have big playability, especially Jones. He's a guy that I think no one's really talking about outside of Madison yet, because I think he made like 2 appearances as a true freshman, but he's going to be the starter this fall. And he's a 4-star from Maryland in that class of 2024. And he's someone who could have a really big fall if all of the pieces come together in the right manner.
So it is interesting because, I mean, even as I look at some of the statistics here from Wisconsin from the previous year, I mean, Braden Locke, we know, barely cracked at least 2,000 passing yards, but we know that Wisconsin, they're all about, the ground and pound game. So, especially with the Big Ten, we know it's been infamous for it. I mean, watching Penn State, Ohio State, and then even Iowa, and even in these particular areas, So does it truthfully make a difference when you do have the quarterback that will obviously stretch more of the field, and then even with the weaponries? Is that kind of something Wisconsin that, looking into their roster, they've really been focusing on, especially for the up-and-coming season? Because we know the run game and the play action is going to be important, especially when you're in some of those tight window games. I mean, even when I watched the near win against Oregon, I mean, I was just, man, it was just like all fighting, grit. So is it kind of something that they looked toward during the offseason to really try to focus to even get some of those bigger plays involved?
So I think that their big focus, let's start on the defensive side of the ball, because what they realized last year is that they could not stop the run. Iowa ran over, around, and through them in what was one of the most pathetic defensive performances I've seen in a quarter century following this team. And what they did is they went out and got jumbo edges and defensive linemen. I think 7 of them through the portal. And they are just throwing as many bodies at this position as they can, because they had bad run fits from the linebackers, but just no one on the defensive line was holding up anyone on the opposing offensive line. And there were giant holes for anyone with, a 40 time under 5.5 seconds could run through, right? I mean, these were just enormous lanes. And so they're bringing in these much bigger, much heavier edges. Corey Walker from Western Michigan is probably the cream of the crop there when you look at the transfer portal class, but there's a lot of guys that they're very excited about. Charles Perkins, Parker Peterson coming up from Tulane, JVR Suggs up from LSU. So they think that they have the bodies on the defensive line to actually let the linebackers run free. The leading tackler on the team the last 2 years has been Hunter Wohler, a safety. Most of the time, if your leading tackler is a defensive back, that's usually not a great sign. And so especially in the defense that Mike Tressel wants to run, which is a 3-3 stack, your linebackers need to be everywhere. They've got a couple talented guys there. Christian Allegro, third-year player, who was a really under-recruited prospect out of upstate New York. It was a kid who took a PG year and really blew up. And Tackett Curtis, former four-star, who's a USC transfer. Those two guys at the linebacker position should be racking up a lot more tackles this fall.
Yeah, so it is interesting though, right? Because, me personally, that I'm in the same similar boat. I would love for my linebackers to get up involved, because I would love to have one that I know that's a tackling machine, a guy that's a go up and get it type of player. And then even having, an improviser, a spotter, if you will, for somebody that can focus up on the quarterback, finding out if there's any improvisions or even if there's even the holes in the run game, because then at least they can then see where the ball is at and then finally just attack it right up from there. So we know too, I think it was just interesting, the fact that the leading tackler was a safety. To me personally, it's like, I would never see that a whole lot if I got like blitz packages where I've got a Mike safety coming in and going in for the blitz to maybe go and get a sack or get loss of yardages. So with that whole front, I think that's basically where they really had to focus on stopping up and on the run. But even with the 3-3, that should be more than enough to be able to at least stop your guys. Or even if you go with sprinkling a little bit of some 4-3 packages here and there, right?
Yeah, well, what it really is, I think, is more of a 4-2-5 than anything else. I think you've got 2 down linemen, 2 heavy edges. Now you're looking at guys who were playing that position last year at mostly around 240, 250. Now you get a guy like Corey Walker in there. He's 290. A lot of these guys are 280, 290 playing that jumbo edge position now. Yeah, they'll have to drop back into coverage every now and again, but they're really ready to get after the quarterback, set an edge in the run game. And that lets those 2 off-ball backers flow. And those off-ball backers haven't been able to flow because there's been no one, occupying bodies in front of them for the past 2 seasons. So getting heavier up front is so crucial for this team, because they have an extremely veteran-laden secondary. I think they'll be starting 5 seniors in their 5 defensive backfield positions, including a 6-year senior in Preston Zachman and Nasir Forkareen at corner and safety, former All-American Ricardo Hallman at one corner. You're looking at Jameer Latimer, who's a transfer from Jacksonville State, who's a 5th year, as well as Austin Brown, who's a senior, who's played a little bit of everything for Wisconsin. He's played nickel. He slotted to play started safety this year, but he can play wherever they need him, in the box, outside the box, even outside corner if they really need him to. So I think the back end of the defense is really, really solid, but it's the question that is on everyone's mind is, will these new bodies in the front 6 be able to hold up and actually not just get gashed in the run game, but also put some pressure on the quarterback? Because there was a complete lack of a pass rush in the past season. Part of the reason they didn't have a lot of sacks, team could just run on them, so they didn't have that many attempts to get to it. But if you're putting your team in a position where the other teams don't have to throw against you, it's not really a great way to start off your plan of attack.
So shifting over to our men's basketball up in Wisconsin, and last year, they went up fourth in the Big Ten, but they, to me, what I like about Wisconsin, and even for like some teams, like most teams, I think Houston, they got a little bit more of the offensive firepower, but with the defense, and then of course too with the time of possessions as well, because you want to protect the ball, protecting leads. Wisconsin, we know, like in the last couple of years, they've been pretty damn good at least defending, getting the rebounds, and then finding other ways to attack to get more of the points up to keep those secured leads. So this next year, it's going to be really interesting for Wisconsin moving forward, because not only just competing up and into their conference, but even at the same time, I love watching March Madness basketball because, it actually starts literally on my birthday, and then you get through the entire 64 itself, and then it's just a wild party. So Wisconsin, what they're looking into next year is we definitely want to start attacking more up on the offensive sides, especially inside the perimeter, be a perimeter attacker, and then find ways to mix in some threes either from on the wings and the arcs. But I think with the rebounding, they've got at least a bunch of guys that we know that are capable of getting you the rebounds, capable of protecting the ball, and then even be able to go and get possession back so that they can go in and attack some of these fast breaks, right?
Yeah, and I think for this team, though, it's been interesting to see Greg Gard evolve as a coach from basically just completely mimicking what Bo Ryan was doing in his flex offense to actually adapting to 2025 and adapting around the talents of his players. If you think back just a couple of years ago with Johnny Davis, that team was pretty good, but it was give the ball to Johnny and let him cook. And now last year, yes, you had John Tonje, who was an All-American, but that team was so much more of a free-flowing, pass the ball's going to keep moving, we're going to make the extra pass, find the open shot. And that finding the extra pass, to the open shooter has always been the hallmark of Wisconsin basketball for 20-25 years, that selfless play. And I think that they've gotten back into that these past couple seasons, and I think that is what is going to continue to make them good and make them competitive. They've done a good job in the portal this year. I think they just added Elijah Gray from Temple, who should be good wing depth a little bit earlier this week. In addition to him, they've also been able to bring in Braden Carrington from Tulsa, Nick Boyd from San Diego State. Both of those guys, I imagine, will be pretty big contributors right away for this team. But I think all eyes are going to end up being on John Blackwell, who, was thinking about testing the waters of the NBA draft. He was probably going to be a very late second-round pick or undrafted kind of guy. Comes back to Wisconsin, doesn't hit the portal. So he had a lot of teams contacting him to, jump their way. He decides to stay at Wisconsin, and he's the kind of guy who has first-team All Big Ten potential. He needs to step up as a shot creator with the ball in his hands. He's already a more than solid catch and shoot guy. He can do, a little bit, dribble penetration and stuff like that. But in order to really take his game to the next level, he's going to be the guy this season that has the ball in his hands with 6 seconds to go in the shot clock, and the play is completely broken down. It's going to be like, John, you got to get this now. And he's got to make that step from being the second guy to being the first guy. And I think that's sort of the biggest question for this team going into the season is people think that he can, but will he?
So I think it's interesting. My last question up from here, because I've asked it to, I've been full of college in the last couple of weeks. I've had a bunch of guys asking them the same question about this because we know that the NIL and the transfer portal has really changed the landscape of just college sports in general. Now, what I'm thinking of, because even in college football, is that we get such good games every single year. And then we know people are like, has the Big Ten set the standard now for college football? I still believe because of SEC successes with draft picks, teams that are always competing in the playoffs, they've set the standard straight. And then the Big Ten, you mix up a bunch of those physical teams that I like, those that are willing to get their nose down on the ground and then just go and play physical football. But, when you think of basketball, what I think is interesting is because with this NIL deal, it's now causing a lot of these college players to come back and get the experiences, right? Because to me, like, I love watching the NFL draft every year because I have that one guy in the first round that I know could be a day one starter or be a contributor to a 53-man roster. Whereas in the NBA, I don't even see these guys as peaks until they're like their third, fourth year in the pros. And then it's like, where did these kids even come from? I want to be able to build that relationship, get to know these guys. So with this and allowing these kids to come back, I'd say maturity for like, the second, third year being there up in college would allow them to be able to be prepared for that next level, especially for a lot of our domestic stars, because you're seeing a lot of these international players and they're just already built up to that standard, versus what we've got here in the States. So, does that make a huge difference in how we can honestly better it for the next few years ahead, especially now with the NIL, the new money coming in and these players? I'm all about players getting paid, but I'm also all about growth, maturity, and then being prepared for that next gear for them to be able to be ready for the pros.
Well, the thing is that all the European guys coming in have been playing professional basketball since they were 13, 14, right? The clubs that they play for, whether you are in Slovenia like Luka Doncic or then Spain or France, whatever, you are playing in what is, it's very similar to the, soccer academies of Europe, right? And so you've been playing for this club. You've been playing basically pro basketball against men since you were 16 for sure. Like, I mean, you look at the guys that Luka Doncic was playing against when he was EuroLeague MVP at like 17, 18. These are, grown bleep men that he is going up against. And so these kids have been professional athletes for 4 or 5 years and getting paid, like not like college NIL money, but, a living wage, and have learned how to be professionals since a very young age, before we do here in the States. You start to learn how to be a professional in college here in the US. And because you are mandated to stay 3 years as a football player, we are inherently going to know you better as a viewing public. But if you're a one and done, or you're a guy who's bounced around to 3 schools in 3 years, we don't know your story as well, right? And so we're not going to have that same investment in you, because you have been going up around and to whatever other stop you're going to make next, right? I think last year there was a player in Wisconsin who then transferred to Kansas. This year, AJ Storr, including high school, is his 8th school in 8 years. You're not going to build that equity with fans, with the viewing public, if you are in a new place every time I blink my eyes.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, if I have seen this guy stay at Wisconsin and grow for 3 years, I can say, hey, I saw him when he was a recruit coming in. We got to be excited about his growth, his development. We saw him grow and blossom and mature in front of our very eyes. And now we know that he can go do it at the next level. But when they're just bouncing around, like, you stop caring about them in the same type of way, because you just don't have time to create those emotional attachments.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And like I said, I mean, especially when you're having these quote unquote face of the league talks, it's just like, well, we're getting all these new players, and it's just a whole entire wave. It's like we felt like this when MJ ended up retiring, but it was easy because it was like we transitioned to LeBron. We got a chance to know him up from high school and then coming up and into the pros. But then it's like, what's going to happen once LeBron's retired? There's going to have to be, new ones. And especially too, you got a lot of these international guys that are taking over the league. So it's like, if we could honestly step our way up as the States, to get these players geared up and ready for it, because a lot of this too is like the G League being up involved becomes a complete cluster. And then it's just like, where do we really grow from here? You know what I mean?
Well, I think the bigger issue is going to be, in this case, is AAU culture, and just the idea of swapping teams and jumping from team to team to team all the time, playing 3, 4, 5, 6 games in a weekend, and just playing and not actually practicing, just playing. But when you talk about face of the league stuff, all of the young American stars outside of Anthony Edwards, all just talking corporate speak. They've all had any personality coached out of them for fear of not being marketable if they say something that is unique, different, anything other than milk toast, right?
Yeah.
And so European guys Jokic doesn't care about your advertising money. He does not care at all about your advertising money. He just wants to go ride his horses.
Right.
But Luka's going to say what he thinks. Giannis is going to say what he thinks. Joel Embiid's going to say what he thinks, but not your American stars. And I think that the loss of players like a Charles Barkley, who would say what is on his mind and is now doing that in the media better than anyone.
Right.
You don't have that from the American stars. And so it's harder for them to connect. It's hard for me to connect with Jason Tatum. I don't think there's anything terribly interesting about him as a person or a player. He doesn't seem to have a personality for me. And I can say, the same thing about a bunch of these other, sort of top tier guys. They're just all sort of it feels like they're almost just commercials of what a great basketball player should look and sound like, but don't feel authentically human. And I think that's why we have a tough time finding the next great American star. And that's why I think Anthony Edwards is the one who's different, because he didn't come up in that AAU system. He was a football player. Right. He's just a raw freak athlete, and he has no filter. And so he's the one who could break the mold.
Yeah, no, you know what? That's well said. And I couldn't even agree more, because I'm the same way. I would love to see Anthony Edwards, just really take it, because he just looks and feels authentic. And then it's honestly where it's that's the way that a basketball player is supposed to be. Now, granted, he's got a lot of learning to do, because in the end, when you're behind, you can't afford a face of the league guy cannot afford to fold like that up and in the playoffs. But hopefully this next up and coming season, he'll learn that. But yeah, even with the growth of a lot of these stars, if they honestly learn and are mentored from a lot of these stars, then maybe that could give us that fighting chance to really go out, compete. And I'm even looking at it from even a global scale, even when you watch, the Olympics, especially for a USA basketball team. But it should be very interesting, and so hopefully this will definitely turn out in a positive way, because it's just a new platform now with this whole NIL. But Matt, appreciate you for coming on by, my friend. Tap in with all of our audiences where people can find you and believing in them Badgers for basketball and for football.
Yeah, man. So me and Matt Bernstein, former Badger fullback and captain, the Hebrew Hammer, we go twice a week talking Badger football. We're interviewing former Badgers. We're out there on all the platforms. I do a weekly recruiting show on Badger247.com. John McNamara and Nick Osen getting really nitty gritty into recruiting. If you're interested in that kind of thing. And then I also produce the Money Down podcast with 3-time Super Bowl champ James White and Sojourn Shelton and Warren Herring. Episode 100 of that dropped today. Interview with Stephon Gilmore. Awesome episode. Make sure you're checking that out. So yeah, you can find me all over those places. I'm online at _Perko_. I think I've got my handle up there on the screen, is where you can find me on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, at Produced by Perko on Instagram. And yeah, I'm out here, making content, probably consuming more content than I should be. And, fortunately getting to meet guys like you, Jake. This is freaking awesome, man. I love the show. I love the energy. And I hope you'll have me back again.
Absolutely, man. And you know what? I love the positivity, man. But congratulations on 100 episodes, man. Like I said, it's always a daily grind. But you know what? If we love doing what we do, and we're providing the content for everyone all around on all these social media platforms, it's so far beyond, man, it's going to make such a big difference. And
yeah, man,
any day and any week. So
I'm excited. Episode 300 of Bleav in Badgers coming out. We dropped 289, I think, today. So,
oh man, I will definitely be
up there.
Up. I'll be tuning in for that one, my friend.
Yeah, we're gonna get some big guests for that one too. So
yes. Take care of yourself, Matt. Appreciate you for coming on by, and good luck for the next up and coming season for Wisconsin this year.
Take care. Jake. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we're moving the gears, because the NHL free agents